This is my 1932 Plymouth Coupe. I'm making some modifications to it. When it was first built, I think the floorboard wasn't cut long enough, and what it's caused is the cab has been pinched up a little bit, so the bottom of the cowl is too far towards the door. It resulted in, when it was assembled, you got this big gap in the door here. You can see light through it. And so in order to raise the door, if I raise the door, I can push the door up and clamp it down tight. But when I do that, down here on the bottom, this part here overlaps the cowl. And so that's because the cowl's been pinched this way too much. So if I cut the floor in half back here, the cowl will be released, and maybe I can move it out that way just enough to raise that door and get that gap back correctly. So what I've done so far, I've taken this door off the hinges, and I've got it clamped in place with some gap spacers and such to try and verify if what I'm saying is correct. And what it appears to be, you see, I've got this one, I've got it spaced reasonably well around here, but at the front of the door, it's really jammed tight right in this area here. So what I'm having to do now is work on cutting the floor in two. So what I've done, I've already cut the floor in half. I don't know if you could see it, but I don't think it shows up very well, but it'll show up better. I'll take this door off. All right, I've removed the door and the seats and roll the carpet back, and here's a better shot. The floor is cut completely in two all the way across and pried open about 5/16 of an inch. All right, I've split the floor and I pushed the cowl out that way a little bit. It's a little farther than it needs to be right now, but I haven't bolted it or welded it down, so it just needs to be, I'll just squeeze it back to the right thickness. That's a little too much gap there. But one of the things I've noticed is when I have the back of the door, you see I'm using this just a paint paddle here as a wedge to get the right gap in along here. When I get the gap set here and all the way down here, looking over here, there's too much gap here. This is about 3 times the thickness of that paint paddle back there. So what I need to do is raise the door up. But if I raise the door up, what happens is it pulls it this way, and this gap gets bigger. What I believe has happened is when the floor was made, the front was perched too high, and the roof line now needs to come down. Since the car is cut in two, the front has some flexibility to it this way. So what I'll do is take the 1/2 inch pad that's between the cowl and the frame, I'll take that out, replace it with a 1/4 inch pad, and then this should come down, this whole front end should come down about a 1/4 inch. Here's kind of where I'm at right now. The gap up top is too much, and the gap in the front's too much. So what I'll do is I'll squeeze this back to close that gap, and then pull the front of the cowl down with the bolts and close the gap at the top.